So basically, let's just chat a bit about the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. What is this economic forum? It's basically a gigantic, I would say, opposition type of forum to the G20, right? You have the G20 summit happening, I believe, in November. You have BRIC summit happening in October in Kazan, and Russia is hosting it. And then you have the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. It's the 27th annual of this forum. And again, it's always taking place in St. Petersburg, but this time they've experienced far more traffic, far more Westerners, far more people coming from all over the country. 25,000 people are expected to walk through. It ends Saturday evening, but basically it's basically Russia inviting people from all countries, whether they're diplomats, journalists, business people, especially. It's focused mainly on economics and business, and any sort of representatives coming from the majority of the global South, countries in Africa, in the Middle East. We had, the usual representatives from Egypt, from Bahrain. You had people from South Africa, and of course, different sectors of the Middle East. You also had Putin today meet with the Bolivian president, Luis Arce, and that was great. They were talking, of course, about how to better cooperate between the two nations. So this has been day 2 today. It was full of panels, full of discussions on, for example, how BRICS countries are going to help stop world hunger, and how they are providing now more than 40% of the grain. And it's basically all of these topics regarding economics, but the theme of this year, of course, is multipolarity, how countries are rising in an age of multipolarity. So you have all these discussions going around in the forum, and you basically have the conversation of how these countries are coming up in this new paradigm shift and are basically emerging in a new world order. And the thing is, so that in spite of the fact that this is a good thing, as I said to Pasta in the beginning before we started the show, you can't have a multipolar world. You can't have this, all of that, that's being talked about by many of these countries. That is great. We had Dilma Rousseff, the BRICS bank president. You had several people from the vice president of Ecuador was there. Pasta, I saw a panel with him. There was different people, and you have all of these people coming and talking about how they're going to create wealth for the countries that were basically stripped of this wealth. For example, Dilma Rousseff talked about how she noted that the IMF, for example, would give out loans to countries in the global South at 4 to 8 times the amount as they would give of interest rate as they would give countries in Europe. And so you had all of this being talked about and discussed. But I have yet to really see people ring about the discussion of Palestine, because this is such an important thing right now. When you talk about what's going on in Israel, Palestine, if we don't resolve that problem, it's going to throw everything out of proportion. And by that problem, I mean Israel needs to stop genociding Palestinians. But it's further than that, right? Because as long as Israel exists in the Middle East region, there won't be peace. So when we talk about a multipolar world, you're talking about cooperation, you're talking about being able to have countries that cooperate, that respect national sovereignty, that have all of these desires to basically have a win-win type of relationship. And with Israel, you're not going to have that in the Middle East. You're certainly not going to have that whatsoever. And you can't ignore that. And again, when we talk about the United States and NATO and what they're doing, it's going to be another question that also needs to be resolved, because you can't have an isolated multipolar world. But overall, I mean, the whole point is to show that Russia isn't really isolated at all. You had people from all over the world coming and just getting excited to meet other people from different countries and basically have a an interaction unlike any other. And by the way, right now, the BRICS countries control more of the, for example, fertilizers and more of the productions than the G20 does. Actually, they have surpassed them. So that is a change unlike we've never seen before. So
yeah, well, the Western Sahara thing that a lot of people overlooked in the Abrams Accord really was a fight for, what is it, phosphates or phosphorus, or the thing that makes fertilizers, right? So I know that that's why a lot of people were overlooking that, understanding that a lot of the BRICS nations control a lot of those resources. And by the way, RT had an article the other day, and it was talking about the de-dollarization in Latin America. And they're talking about mainly Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela going with the BRICS currency. It's going to be interesting to see that because, as you know, fam, and we explain this to a lot of people, when we go down to Latin America, their currency is pegged to our currency. We use our currency to exchange for their currency, whether it be in Nicaragua for the Cordoba, whether it be in Cuba for the peso. I've yet to go to Venezuela, but I believe the same thing is there. If they do swap out, and there are other options, we're talking about 97 states, you're talking 97 countries that are prepared to go. Well, if you don't have to be pegged to the United States dollar anymore, that spells death to the dollar. And the United States is not going to take that lying down, even though the United States, they show their might with their military, right? Proxy wars, arming other countries to fight our adversaries, where the Chinese and the Russians come in and like, hey, let's come in with our checkbook. Let's come in with our infrastructure. So it's going to be very interesting because you can see, I would sense that China and Russia would both say, let's start picking up our operations and accelerating them in Latin America. If they're going to do this over here in our backyard, in Kiev, in Ukraine, and now saber-rattling in Taiwan, then we have to go financially push our influence in these other Latin American countries, and that's in our backyard. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be very, very interesting. Please go ahead, Finn. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, well, I was just, I mean, the topic of the IMF was definitely talked about, and how they have, like I said, subjugated all these countries into a position of being unable to sustain themselves. And that's really changing, like you mentioned, also with the de-dollarization, but as well as the creation of the BRICS currency, as well as the focus on these countries trading with their own currencies. And more what you saw also was like technological development in even robotics, development in so many things, even to the point where you're like, okay, Russia, we get it. I know you're trying to compete with the West, but also, you know, you don't need these transformers here. There were, you know, there was like a Russian transformer there, and robots and all these things. So that is the question, because a lot of, I heard the words, the climate change and all of these things being mentioned as well, because some of these countries that are participating are all from all over the place. Some of them are members of the G20. Some of them are, you know, they continue to do business with the West. So it's not like it's going to happen overnight. This isn't something that is happening immediately, but it's something that is happening already. And the emphasis on having these countries trade in their own currencies is already causing a hassle for the United States. It's really, really bad for them, for the dollar. But I think that's happening more and more. And with China, by the way, the Chinese cars, they're so popular in Russia. You see so many Chinese cars now, more because a Toyota here costs you $60,000. A Tesla that's worth $100,000 or $70,000 in the States costs you 3 times as much in Russia because of the sanctions and because of the importing. So cars from other countries are expensive, but cars from China, from Russia, from areas that are nearby are actually affordable, and they're very, very good cars. And so you see that industry, also the automotive industry, also playing a role. So there's a lot that's been going on. There's still a few days left of the forum, and I'll be doing videos. I have already a few that will go out. I've started a new project that I'll need help with as well. And there's another thing I wanted to say about the forum. I mean, it's huge. The venue is gigantic. There's so many people. There's so many cool things that happen. It kind of reminds me of, the Democratic Convention, something like that, but times 10, and just like a bunch of different countries and different people coming together. It's quite crazy. Oh, And one guy that I actually spoke to, and I got a chance to interview as well, actually is an Indian man that was living in Moscow for 30 years. And he's a businessman. He started his own company. And he said a few really interesting things about Russia. But here's just a clip. I put a clip up, but it's also on my YouTube at Fiorella in Moscow, the full video of him. He talked about how when he first moved to Russia, it was not a safe place. Moscow specifically, it was not a safe place. It was hard to, there was a lot of crime, there was a lot of things. And in the amount of time he has lived, it is night and day. It's changed so much. And now, you know, women can walk in the streets by themselves. You can, it's so safe. It's so clean. It's so green. I mean, he just goes on and on about Russia, and he has a very interesting point of view. So let's go ahead and play this clip and hear what he says about why he thinks Russia is, specifically Moscow, is so amazing.
You had told us earlier you lived in Moscow. Why do you live in Moscow? Do you think Russia is an emerging power? Because the United States and Europe see it in a different way.
I think it's all about perspectives. I believe Russia has always been a very powerful country in terms of resources, natural resources. A lot of technologies that they have are pretty advanced. And Moscow, I believe, and I think is probably the center of Europe. It's physically located at a very fabulous place. As a city, is one of the most amazing cities in the world. I've lived in so many cities in the world. I just love it. It's very safe. It's very clean. It's very green. So transportation networks are amazing. You know, you guys must have seen that. So I think Moscow as a global city has emerged as a global city, and in spite of what has happened recently in geopolitical arena, I think Moscow will continue to be a very interesting and important city in the world.
Can you tell me your name?
Yeah, my name is Akash Deep Singh, and I'm the president of the Indian Business Council.
Yeah. So again, pretty much any person I've ever met that comes to Moscow has the same reaction. And he's lived here now for 30 years. And in the full video, you'll see like he talked about how things have changed, and the transportation in Moscow is just crazy. It's insane. And so what I've seen here, the trend that I'm seeing here is in the US, right? We had wonderful roads. We had this infrastructure. We have like pretty buildings, and everything is like new, and we have a lot of space and a lot of comfort. Well, that's slowly and now quickly going down. Whereas in Russia, they had pretty much everything on the floor after the fall of the Soviet Union, and they had to rebuild, and things were really bad for a while. And now they've focused on rebuilding, on infrastructure. They're still focused on infrastructure because Russia is huge. And there was a lot of people from a lot of regions, from the Far East, from Vladivostok, from far regions in the northeast of Russia where there's polar bears. And I got to talk to this lady as well. And they're saying their life there is great. Their life there is pretty awesome. But it's just, you know, you don't get to hear about it in the West. And so it's really interesting to hear people say, oh, I'm excited to come here. This is, you know, my point of view of Russia, of what I'm seeing. And it's not all political people, but it's interesting to see business people, political people, and just government also all in one place. So yeah, it's been interesting so far.
Fam, a lot of people in the chat are liking what you have to say. There's a lot of people also talking about the Mexican elections. I think we can get to that maybe next week. But you have an interesting thing going on with the St. Petersburg event. But let me ask you a question. Why was it so important for the State Department to pull Scott Ritter off the plane and not allow him to go? We also heard talks that, you know, Judge Napolitano didn't go because he didn't want to get all jacked up and get his passport pulled. Why are they doing this? What's the reason why they're preventing some of these people from going?
Well, the only person that was prevented from going was Scott Ritter. Napolitano was told not to go for another reason. But Ritter basically said that he tried to get on the plane, and of course his documents were seized, and he didn't ask the name of the officers who seized his documents, but they were on the order of the State Department, and that's that. Which I talked to earlier to Larry, and he also said that that's not legal as well. And I think that, why are they doing this in the US? I mean, I think part of it is Scott's background and who he is, and how he has like this background that's very dangerous to the United States. I firmly think that the United States views Russia right now as its war enemy. I think they're at that point where they've had an undeclared war on Russia. So if somebody like Scott Ritter, who's going to talk about weapons and who was a former weapons inspector, is going to come and perhaps mention something related to that, I think that they felt threatened and they wanted to stop it. We've also seen the persecution also of, or attempted persecution of journalists, the detention as well of some of us, and just the questioning, the severe questioning of it all. Does this now give impetus, right, for this to happen to others? Sure, it could. But again, we're talking about a high profile person with a specific expertise of sorts and a specific background also, that is going to be very different than most people who just say something that's pro-Russian or whatever. I don't think we're at that point yet. I think it's worse in Europe, to be honest, because of the way they have their laws. But I do think like we're going towards that path where if you say anything, it's going to be met with some sort of disdain. What I found interesting was that George Clooney tried to say that it was a mistake, that the head of the PR of this firm that he's behind misspoke and actually didn't mean to say that they were going to persecute any Russian affiliated journalists of sorts, that this person misspoke. And I think that that's a complete lie. It seems like they're backtracking, retracting. And I think that's part of the reason for that is because of the elections that are coming up right now in November. And once that happens, whatever happens with the elections, we know that Joe Biden is admittedly in decline, right? The Washington Post admitted it. He had a terrible interview in the Times. And I think after that, you're going to see whatever happens. If Donald Trump gets in, believe me, he's not going to do any of the positive things he's saying he's going to do either. He's not going to. And anybody that thinks he's going to is being extremely naive at this point. He didn't do it then. He's not going to do it now. He would have done it a long time ago. He's a part of it. You may have a small few things change domestically, and you may have a bunch of liberals cry. You may have all these things, but at the end of the day, foreign policy wise, things are not going to change. He is a Zionist. He wants to go to war with China. I mean, I could go on and on about all of that, but that's another matter.
Operation Warp Speed, fam.
I just read this comment from Friendly. I'm not, worried. I mean, about it. I take precautions. I think anybody that's a journalist right now should take precautions. A journalist that is telling the truth should take precautions. As a journalist, we're supposed to have more protections, right? We're supposed to have the protection for the fact that I work for an actual company, the protection that I actually publish things and do all these things. But that should be irrelevant, right? Even if you're a citizen, if a citizen journalist, you shouldn't be detained. And I was detained. And, here's the thing. I'm not doing anything wrong. And if we learned from Julian Assange is that if you're a threat enough, they will make you an example of it. And there's so much happening with the Julian Assange case that, just there's so much that needs to be looked into. But what I will say is that they have made an example out of him, that they have tried to go after him as an example for all of us, but it's not going to stop all of us. I mean, what I think should happen is more journalists should come to Russia. More people should come and defy the United States. More people should come and see what it's like in Iran, in Russia, in China, and all of these countries that they tell you not to go to. I want to go to Syria. I want to go to Lebanon. I went to the West Bank. I go to the Donbass. I think you need to see it for yourself if you're a journalist, if you're going to write and have an opinion about all of these countries, if you're going to talk about Cuba, if you're going to talk about Venezuela, if you're going to talk about all these places. It adds a layer of just knowledge, and it's a different perspective, because we can all sit here and analyze, for example, why is there a picture of the Mexican president with a Zionist, and then assume that she's a Zionist, but I can find a picture with her with a keffiyeh on as well. So we do the same thing with, Lula or with any other leader. You can't rely on this sort of reductive analysis. You have to really go and understand the governments of these people, the populations, and where they're coming from, and what's been going on in their past throughout the years, and so on and so forth. And I think if we stop ourselves from going to these countries because we're told that there's going to be a consequence if we do, I think that we're not doing our job as journalists. And I firmly believe that, it is what it is. If you want to be a journalist at this point, in this stage in the game, during this time, you have to be ready to face repercussions. And you can take, of course, measures if you have a family, if you have whatever else you need to do. But if you're with the ability to do it, I would say do it. And whatever happens, happens. Prepare yourself, have a lawyer, all these things. But, at the end of the day, it is our job, and somebody's got to do it, right?
Well, there's Fee giving you advice to go running into the burning building, and she says reductive analysis. Wow, fam, what a great word. Pull your tongue out of my... Never mind. That was from the movie Snatch. In case you wanted to see it out there, please go see it. And I love it, fam. That's great. You got one more clip over here, I see, right? Let's play this last clip so we can get you on out of here. You got a lot of work to do over there. What is that, fam?
Yeah. So, fam, it's not even a clip. It's just the videos from the BRICS. You can see this is Moldovan dancing in people drinking wine. There was wine.
Big screen
forum.
Hit the arrows.
I guess it's big. It's a vertical video. So.
Oh, that's the biggest we'll go? Okay.
Yeah, it's because it's a vertical video.
Oh, there it goes. Don't tell me, fam.
Fam, there's a bunch of people just drinking wine and dancing.
I want to see and feel it. Where was this at?
At the Economic Forum.
This is so awesome. Fam, I want one of those hats and those vests.
All right, I'll see if I can get you one.
See, the hat. I want a hat and a vest, and I will pimp that like there's no tomorrow.
Russia has some of the best exhibitions that are free to the people. This is obviously part of a forum, but they also have the exhibitions in this park called Vydenka, which is just a huge park where they have every single region of Russia, and you can learn about the minerals in each region and all of that. So they're used to that. And this is just a picture from one of the panels. A lot of people here, they have the translation device for your ear. You can listen to all of that. That's Dilma Rousseff, former vice president, of course, of Brazil. So yeah, fam, that's it.